Hello? Hey guys, I'm just going to let everybody know that I'm live. It's a little bit of a different setup. I'm not on StreamYard, I'm on Streamlabs, so things are a little bit different. So just give me a second to let people know that we are live. Let me know in the chat how you guys are feeling, what you guys been doing over the last couple of days, all of that. Let me know in the chat what you guys are thinking. Obviously, we have loads to talk about. Had my show set up for 5:30. Had the show set up for 5:30, and I ended up going early, obviously, because there's been some news that has dropped around Granit Xhaka. So yeah. But yeah, so just let everybody know that we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to SheKnowsArsenal. My name is Jessica. I'm your host. You can follow me on Twitter at JessinoTweets and at SheKnowsArsenal. Actually, it's not JessinoTweets anymore. It's IM_JessBlack. But yeah, you guys should already be following me. Like, you really should. But if you're not, that's where you can find me. We have loads to talk about. This is going to be a transfer show. All about Arsenal's most recent news and most recent news and transfer news. So make sure you guys like this video, subscribe to the channel. Arsenal want to bring in two high-profile midfield players that are going to cost £170 million altogether. That is a complete overhaul. That is a surgery. That is surgical on Arsenal's midfield. And quite frankly, I feel like it's been overdue. We have been linked extensively with Declan Rice as well as Moises Caicedo, and those links are getting more and more hot over the last couple of days. And last night, there was, news around Arsenal wanting both, which I have to be honest with you, I'm still a little bit like that would be quite a bit, to bring in both. But that's the type of summer that Arsenal need. Off of the back of a really poor performance against Brighton at home at the Emirates and not winning the Premier League after being in a very advantageous position to do so, Arsenal need to have a really big summer, not to just like show people that we're serious, but because we're in a very good position. I think, when you step away from social media and you kind of sit with your feelings to try to figure out how you feel about, how Arsenal's season has panned out. From my perspective, I don't feel like we have come to an end or we have peaked or we've lost our moment. I feel like we've built a very solid foundation. And I also think sometimes you need to lose certain things or fail in certain, scenarios in order to know what to do and what not to do. If you guys didn't get a chance to watch it, I think you guys should. There was an interview that had come out pre the Brighton game with Ramsdale and John Stones. And it wasn't so much even just like, obviously it was a fun, nice interview to watch, but just the difference in mentality and, the way that they answered their questions around the title race, you could just see that John Stones been there, done it before, wore the t-shirt. And Ramsdale was very honest about Arsenal's inability to deal with the pressure and how he felt after winning so many games that Arsenal would be calm, cool, and collected and just continue to win. And he didn't anticipate that level of panic to set in from the group. And so they're definitely going to learn from this. And obviously, some players have probably shown themselves not to be really good in those pressurized situations, and then others have shown that they can deal with it a little bit better. But overall, I think the group kind of probably got a rude awakening about what it's like to be in a title race, right? And so off of the back of that, Arsenal need to use this as a foundation to build for next season. Next season is going to be even more difficult than this season. Not necessarily, I don't really buy into the whole idea that everybody else is going to buy and spend a whole bunch of money, so we're not going to have any opportunity and this is it. More from the standpoint of just the remit from an Arsenal perspective is going to be different. I anticipate Arsenal will not be the favorites to finish in the top four. I've said that many times, like a lot of media and pundits will have us outside of the top four. But from an Arsenal fan perspective, I think we're all going to expect for us to retain our position in the Champions League spots, as well as do well in the Champions League. Well, you know, for you might be different than what it is for me. For me, that's getting to at least the quarterfinal. And also challenge for a title and win a trophy. Like, that's a huge remit for a team who's, you know, the assignment was to maybe win a trophy and to get top four. And so that's where the reinforcements really come in. And we've spoken about this a lot on this channel about what those reinforcements need to look like. Project Youth was really more of like something that we were doing because we had to. You know, Arteta never really showed, for me, any signs of somebody who wanted to rely on youth. He was actually looked like somebody that was doing the opposite. In the beginning of, you know, his tenure as Arsenal's, you know, manager, he was relying on the likes of Aubameyang and Lacazette and Willian for long periods of time, even maybe past the point where he should have. And so I think Project Youth will kind of be at the end of its rope. I really do. I think we should be bringing in players with a little bit more experience, a little bit more know-how. And if they are young, they need to be special talents, because these guys are going to be under immense pressure. They're going to need to perform every 4 days, and there's not going to be any excuses. Nobody's going to be really listening to the young team that's never done it before. It's going to, the temperature was hot at the end of the season. It's going to be even hotter now. So we have been linked with two fantastic midfielders in Moises Caicedo and Declan Rice. And you guys know my feelings on, you know, Declan Rice in particular, that I think not just from a footballing perspective, but from like a personality perspective, he could really fit in well with the group. He's a leader in himself. He's waited for the next step. He's played in the World Cup. Like, he's somebody that I feel like would fit in quite well. And then you have Moises Caicedo, who's younger, but also started in a World Cup, has some experience in the league, and absolutely bopped us the other day. I mean, he was outstanding. He really was, beyond the tackle that he made on Martinelli, which he apologized for on social media. He was fantastic. And with those two players, you know, we played against West Ham not too long ago and also playing against Brighton. You could kind of see what we were missing. Missing legs, missing physicality, missing a little bit of personality. And so Arsenal are looking for some physical players to come in, some athletic players to come in to mesh with the technical ability that we already have. And that should come together in a really nice balance for Arsenal to move forward. Let's see what you guys are saying. Obviously, this is a different setup, so I won't be able to put all your comments up on the screen, but I will read them out for sure. EK says, after the season Xhaka has had, we should be trying to push for 20 million. We'll be talking about Granit Xhaka because he's very important in this conversation around midfield. Ash says, sad to see Xhaka go. We'll talk about that as well. Matt G is saying, Caicedo. Obviously excited about the prospect of, you know, having two fabulous midfielders playing for Arsenal Football Club. Aha says, the worst Arsenal home performance I've ever seen. Brighton fully took the piss the whole game, plus dominated from minute one. Title challengers played like that at home. Losing is one thing, but the manner, it was awful. Like, it really was. And it looked like the players were kind of just ready for it to be done. They were ready for this title race nonsense to just be done so that they could just fully relax. That's what it looked like to me. They weren't up for it. And, you know, as much as they want to probably go into the media and say that they don't check the Man City results, I feel like they watch they watch those games in the locker room. They watch it on their phones. They check the result. And, you know, from an Arsenal perspective, you probably watch Manchester City rest four of their best players and turn up to Goodison Park, a place where we tend to pull our pants down, and absolutely dismantle an Everton team that are fighting for survival. And so we had to play at home after a really difficult game against Newcastle, against a Brighton team that was dying to beat us because they just got their asses whooped. And so, yeah, it wasn't looking good. And the performance was an absolute joke. Like you said, it's one thing to lose, but it's another thing to just completely collapse the way that they did. There wasn't a single decent performance. I think maybe Reece Nelson was the best off of the bench, but you just kind of saw that, like, it's not so much like a quality thing with us. I do think we need to up the quality in the team, but I think the biggest gap between Manchester City and Arsenal really was the mentality. They'd been there and done it before. They looked the part. They knew when to peak. They know that the run-in is the most important part, and Arsenal really peaked prior to that and just collapsed mentally, really. And so that's a big part of why I think we need new players in. I think we have a couple of players that have been around long enough for us to know what their personality and what their mentality is when it really matters the most, and they're not young, and so, you know, we can't really rely upon them. And so they're the players that I'm looking for Arsenal to replace, quite frankly. CAA Mafia says Caicedo is the real deal and can play various positions. If you like, De Zerbi has been kind of playing him in this, like, you know, inverted right back position. That's something that I think Arsenal fans were wanting Arteta to do with Thomas Partey. And, like, my biggest fear with that was, like, he would try to chase one player down and just tear his hamstring and be down for the rest of the season. And it doesn't really matter what your skin color is. And I think a lot of times Thomas Partey gets lumped into this category of, like, an athletic, agile player. He's really not. He's an on-the-ball type of player. And what Caicedo really gives you is some on-the-ball types of stuff, but really he's athletic. He wins his duels. He wins the ball back, and he's a real physical specimen, really. Like, he's really good. And so, yeah, I thought he was fabulous against us. And I instantly was like, I feel like that's a player that we need, but we also need Rice too. Like, we need two midfielders. You know, that's just the truth. Yo-Yo says Arsenal have an inferiority complex. Very few at the club and even in the fan base were ready for the title. And I think that this is something that even we maybe need to look at ourselves in the mirror as well as fans, is I think that we were just as, erratic and lack composure and all of those types of things, lack maturity that, you know, the players did. Like, we kind of mimicked the players quite a bit. So many Arsenal fans have never seen an Arsenal team win the league. And even I was quite young when I saw Arsenal win the league as Invincibles. So, you know, we've been there and done it before, and maybe we could have a little bit of composure. I think some of the early talks of, you know, almost feeling like we've already won the title and what we're going to do when we win it and all of that, I think we'll be a lot more quiet and a little bit more humble going into next season for sure. I hope we are, because yeah, it's been rough online for the last couple of days. Errol Graham says, would you sell Thomas Partey, Jess, or keep him, Jess? I mean, I feel like he's somebody that just can't be the most important part of the puzzle. I don't necessarily feel like he needs to be sold. I think a player of his quality could be really useful as a squad player, but the last 3 seasons, like Thomas Partey, albeit we kind of figured out that maybe Saliba was our most important player at the end of the day. But prior to that, I think we all kind of felt like if Thomas Partey were not to play, we'd be dead, especially prior to January and us bringing in Jorginho. And him being so important to the team, he really hasn't stepped into that role mentally at all. He's a player that I feel like has immense quality, but, you know, he's a piece of a puzzle, not somebody that you can really rely upon. I don't think he can be a part of your core. I don't think he's a leader. I think he's just a very talented player. And, you know, so he just cannot be our most important player. If he's somebody that you use, you know, in certain games, or, you know, you want to take out somebody else and give them a rest, and what, you know, a valuable tool is, you know, having Thomas Partey coming off of your bench. But this is the last season where he needs to be super important. You know, I think that's pretty clear. So I wouldn't necessarily be up for selling him, you know. Aha says Partey was great until April and then fell off of a cliff. I think with Thomas Partey, it very much is the case that I feel like he's probably injured. Before that international break, remember we saw that a physio was actually going with him to international duty with Ghana, and he had a huge strapping around his leg after playing like 90 minutes for Ghana. That's one thing that I hope that Arsenal players really get through their heads soon, is that they need to manage themselves outside of Arsenal a lot better. There were a lot of Man City players that didn't play that much during international break. They all called off or, you know, had minor injuries and didn't go. and our players were playing 90 minutes. And, you know, I can kind of understand Saka a little bit because maybe he feels like he needs to establish himself. Thomas Partey, you're the freaking captain. You know, just say you can't do it, you know, and I just feel like we're quite naive. And he came back from that international break and looked nothing like the Partey that was there from before. And he usually breaks down or goes missing or is injured right after that international break. And I think we haven't looked the same since that international break. It kind of coincided with Rob Holding, but I think just in general, we hit a wall right then. And so we have to learn how to I think manage the season better where we're not like dying right before that international break. That's actually when we should be getting stronger. Kofi says with Partey, there's also the other situation, which I'm really wary about. Thank you for your super chat, Kofi. I really appreciate that. I've spoken about it very little on this channel because, like, let's be real, we don't know a lot of the information, but it's going to obviously like have to be dealt with soon rather than later. So we'll know more information and how things will proceed. He may or may not be here, you know, and so Arsenal looks set to bring in 2 midfielders regardless. And, you know, he'll either be a squad player, hopefully, or, you know, he'll be somebody that is not at Arsenal. And so, you know, we'll have to see on that. We really will. So let's go ahead and jump into the actual nitty gritty. There's 270 of you guys in here. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel. Again, like I said, this is a different setup that I feel like I personally like a little bit more. I can't put your comments up on the screen, which is a little bit different, but I think I like the setup a little bit better. So you guys can let me know in the chat if you guys are okay with it, but I will read your comments out. I just won't be able to put them up on the screen if that's all right. So first little bit is that, you know, the Times are reporting that Arsenal have a war chest. You know, that is always like the word that always comes out is the war chest and the money that's going to be available to Mikel Arteta for this summer. But they're saying around 200 million, and that Arteta wants 2 midfielders, one being Declan Rice and the other being Moises Caicedo, who and the two of them together could cost 170 million. And that's a significant amount of money, but it's the type of money that I would expect Arsenal to spend with Champions League. I don't think we should just leave it in the bank, right? They should be going immediately into recruitment. And so, I mean, Arsenal need 2 midfielders. So this is nice news to see. And, you know, Arsenal are set for talks with West Ham to try to get Declan Rice. He'll cost around, they're saying that Arsenal want to go in with a bid of like 90 million or something like that. And obviously West Ham have kind of been in the media saying that they want 120 million, but behind the scenes it will be a little bit less than that. And Arsenal want to get those talks going as soon as possible. But, you know, West Ham are also in the midst of, you know, playing in Europe. And so if they were to go to the next round and get to the final, no talks would really take place before that. That's what they're saying. But Arsenal are really desperate to bring in Declan Rice, and they're willing to spend quite a bit to get him to Arsenal, which is nice to see. Like, I want to see my team really go for it. We kind of saw in January that they were willing to put the money down for Mudryk, put the money down for Caicedo, and hopefully they can get some of these deals over the line. Now, this is team news and Kicks. This is an account that usually comes out with the lineups and news about lineups before it's actually dropped, and they're a really decent source. Transfers wise, I think they're pretty spot on and haven't gotten much wrong, but at the same time, like, you still have to remember that they're not like, you know, it's not a here we go or anything like that. But they're basically saying that Arsenal have provisionally agreed on, you know, with the club and the player, the upfront is like way lower than what is quoted, and the wages are a lot lower than what's being said. But, you know, it's nowhere near it's not done, but, you know, it could be. And this is interesting to me because, you know, Declan Rice went to Gabriel Jesus's birthday party. You know, why would he go, you know, if he wasn't going to join Arsenal? Now, I know that we've had players to work for us before, but I would hope that Arsenal would have their ducks in the row to get this done as soon as possible. And he was really genuinely desperate to come to Arsenal so that we could make this happen, because this is the type of deal that you need to get done quickly. It is the type of deal where you need to have complete buy-in from the player. From what we know, he wants Champions League and he wants to stay in London, and we're the only club that can offer him that. But there are other clubs that can offer him Champions League, like Manchester City, who are said to be really interested in him as well, losing out on Jude Bellingham. Haha. Also, Liverpool, I'm sure, interested in him too, but, may not have Champions League. We don't know. And then also Manchester United, so Arsenal need to make sure that they have all their ducks in a row to get this done. But I have this weird feeling that it is kind of done. They've been really tapping him up for a while. And so not necessarily done in the sense of like he's coming tomorrow, but in the sense of Arsenal feel confident enough to brief the media, because I feel like a lot of the stuff that's coming out today and yesterday are kind of briefs for the media, not from the standpoint of like wanting to fool Arsenal fans, but to kind of quiet down the negativity around not winning the league. Saida says a lot of our international players are captains. Where did that comment go? It went away. Oh, a lot of our international players are captains for their countries, so I can see why most of them play the international games. It doesn't set a good example. I kind of understand that. I still kind of feel like we could be a little bit, more clever with it. Like Saka's not a captain, and he's one of the ones that has kind of fallen off the most at the end of the season, which, he's somebody that I look at that gets killed so much by Arsenal fans, because, when he doesn't have a good game, they're just like on him. And I'm just like, did you have to play the 90 minutes, for Southgate? Did you have to, whatever. But I understand that some of them are captains, but I still feel like some of them could just sit out. Aha says, just the comments aren't appearing on our screens like usual. Yeah, so I'm just reading them out. Like, the program that I'm using is not StreamYard, and StreamYard, you can click on it and then it shows up on the screen. Streamlabs doesn't allow you to do that, but it goes straight in, which is a little bit different. So I'm liking this setup a little bit more, but if you guys prefer to be able to see your comments, like, of course I can go back to it. This is just a little bit better for me. So yeah, let's see what you guys are saying. Tony says, I don't feel as confident anything is done with Rice after what happened with Mudryk and Caicedo. And I completely understand that. Like, nothing is done until they have their, they actually have the shirt, like, and they're on Arsenal.com. Like, nobody will tell you that more than like an old school Arsenal fan that's just like not into the transfers at all. They're just like, well, just let me know when they're on the website, kind of thing. So I wouldn't say like it's like 100% done, but I have a feeling that we've done so much work on it that it could get done pretty quickly. And it needs to. If it drags on to the end of the summer, we won't get him. For real. Matt says, don't do it, Jess. Remember, Mudryk, won't believe it until I see him in the shirt. Exactly. I have a feeling that it's really close, but obviously, like, if it doesn't happen, I wouldn't be surprised either, because this is Arsenal and shit happens, Triple C says, do we really trust Arsenal to sign Rice or Caicedo? Jess, I trust them to sign Rice or Caicedo. Where I have a little bit of reluctancy is if they'll sign both, because from a balanced perspective in midfield, I kind of thought that Arsenal would go for more of an attacking 8, like to play in that Xhaka role, because the whole issue, not with Xhaka in general, but like even like last season, like you could just see that it wasn't like a natural position for Xhaka, and he's adopted it quite well this season, but there's still a little bit of like a clunkiness to it. It's not a natural fit for him, I don't think. And so my thought process was that we would bring in a DM and like an attacking 8, and then have a more defensive left back, or a more defensive left back option, and a real ball winner athletic DM, so that we could push right up and not have our left 8 have to do so much defensive work, not have to be so box to box, and just kind of be more a part of like the 5 lanes up top and not have to do all the shuttling. But, I wouldn't mind Caicedo and Rice, and we'll talk a little bit about how that looks formation-wise and things like that. It's just not what I expected. I thought it would be Rice or Caicedo, and it could very well still be Rice or Caicedo. It really can be. We've also been linked to Mason Mount. We've been linked to Orkun Kochu. We've been linked to quite a few of like more attacking left 8s as well. So I trust them to get one or the other done for sure. But I hear what you're saying about like, not trusting it because of things in the past, but they'll get at least one of them over the line. I'm sure of it. Amira says the Rice saga gives me Jesus vibes. The reports, the reason why he wants to come and also are so similar. It feels inevitable. Also, unlike Mudryk, I'm sure Rice has more control over his career. Yeah, I mean, remember Jesus and like when people were like, we never get deals done. We never get deals done. Jesus was one of those where we knew kind of like 2 or 3 weeks before the season actually ended that we were interested in him. And it was like done quite quickly. When he came back from like that international break, he was our player, So I kind of have a similar feeling like you do. It's a high profile transfer with a lot more money involved, and we've been burnt recently with the Mudryk thing. So I completely understand that for sure. There's like 400 of you guys in. Oh no, sorry. There's 200 of you guys in here. Make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. Now, let's pop in for the Granit Xhaka situation, because this is very intertwined with the Caicedo and Rice conversation. And what I will say, actually, I'll take this down for a second because I just have to say this really quick, is that I was absolutely brutalized online. First, by saying that I felt like for sure somebody would leave. Like, I was like, somebody big will leave. If we're going to bring in 2 midfielders, if it's Caicedo and Rice, or Rice and somebody else, or Caicedo and somebody else, somebody big is going to leave. Like, you're not going to keep everybody. And I just had this weird feeling. I was like, the numbers don't add up. We have so many midfielders: Emile Smith-Rowe, Vieira, Xhaka, Partey, Jorginho, Elneny. I think I already said Partey, but he had 2 more to that. The balance is just not really there. And I know people are like, but we have all these competitions to play in. Yeah, we do. But you still need to have, adequate cover for defense, adequate cover for attack. And if you have 9 midfielders, 8 midfielders, that's damn near like, that's a lot of your roster space taken up. So I would imagine that number would be closer to 6, 6 really quality midfielders that you can use in multiple positions to get the job done. So, absolutely brutalized for saying that, especially because I said the only 2 players that I was certain that would not go anywhere were Martin Odegaard and Fabio Vieira. And then when the report initially came out around Xhaka leaving, people were, it just can't be true. It just can't be true. It can't be true. And I was just like, well, it makes a lot of sense. Granit Xhaka, we've had many conversations around him over the last couple of years, and albeit, our feelings on him have changed, I don't think he's changed as a person. And I don't really see Granit Xhaka being the type of player that wants to play a bit part role. I think he wants to be important. He's also, adopting like more of a squad role is not something that I actually see for him as a player, not in his prime, or post-prime, like whatever. He's 30. He can still play like for 5 more years. I can see him playing for 5 more years. But, he's also tried to leave Arsenal quite a bit, quite a few times. He was going to go to Hertha Berlin, and Arteta had to talk him off the ledge. He was going to go to Roma. Arteta had to talk him off the ledge. He was also linked to Bayer Leverkusen last summer, and he stayed. And so I don't know if he's like as desperate to be at Arsenal the way that Arsenal fans think that he is. I think he's done us a solid, and he stayed for Arteta so that he could stay as a leader and all that kind of stuff, because we weren't quite ready to invest in midfield the way that we are now. And now that he's kind of helped us get into Champions League and he's done really well, he sees that as like a big enough opportunity to go back. He also probably has better suitors now because he's played so well. And there's also rumors of his family wanting to go back to Germany. So for me, it always kind of made sense. And, everybody's shock is kind of shocking to me. But then there's also this feeling that like naturally, like the starters should just become squad players, and like that's how the squad should be built. But I know this is going to be an unpopular position, unpopular, opinion, and people won't like to hear it. But we didn't spend 40 million on Fabio Vieira for him to sit behind Granit Xhaka for another season. Like, it's just not going to happen. Before things kind of got a little bit rocky. Fabio Vieira was coming in for Xhaka and also starting over Xhaka in like one game, I think he did. And so I think he'll get more playing time. And the only way that he can do that is if Granit Xhaka goes. And despite how the fans feel about Fabio Vieira, I think Arteta really likes him and wants to get him integrated. So there has to be space for that to happen. And so Granit, I think, is a player that maybe you do have to remove in order to progress. For me, nothing has really changed. I think Granit has played a lot better this season, but I also think evolving means maybe not having him. And so I don't actually think it's as big of a mistake as some people are saying it is. I'm seeing that there's a lot of takes and a lot of reaction to it. I think because people have really grown to love Granit Xhaka, and like I've also grown to love Granit Xhaka over these last 2 seasons. But also I love Arsenal more than I love Granit Xhaka, and I think if the club feel comfortable moving him on and we're going to bring in 2 high-profile midfielders, I don't think it's as big of a deal as people are making out to seem. And I don't see it as a mistake. I see it as an opportunity to evolve beyond somebody that doesn't naturally suit the position that he's playing anyway. But we've also spent quite a bit of money on somebody else that can play that position, and they kind of need to have that space. It's kind of like you got to shuffle some things around. So I don't think it's that big of a mistake, but I can understand why Arsenal fans feel like it, because they don't trust Vieira and they also don't trust the club to bring in the players to replace him, which I understand 100%. So this came from Florian Plettenberg, whatever. That Granit Xhaka to Bayer Leverkusen is like actually like going, and the talks are taking place, and everything is moving smoothly. There's no talks between the clubs, but the fee is something around like 15 million euros. There's also, Fabrizio Romano, like just before we started, gave like the actual, like it's happening. Chris Wheatley also did as well, that he is leaving. So it's no longer a rumor. It's a thing that's happening. And so when we play against Wolves, like he needs to get a really good send off, I think, because he's been such a good servant to the club, even though it's been a rocky relationship between him and the fans. I think he's always given 110%, even when sometimes he didn't do the right things or he wasn't quite good enough or whatever. I think his turnaround is a testament to his mentality and the type of professional that he is. And so he deserves nothing more than love and praise, at the Emirates against Wolves. For sure, would love, a Xhaka boom, a Xhaka banger. I would love that. But talks are ongoing and it is happening. So buckle up. It's going down. It really, really is. And I understand people being frustrated maybe about that because of the fees, maybe not as big as people want it to be. And also they view him as a better squad option than a Vieira, whatever. But young players can't develop when their senior players actively like in the position that they should be in. And so I think if you bring in a Rice and he plays the left 8, Vieira will be his backup and will also be the backup to Odegaard. That will give him opportunities to play more. And an example I feel like that I wanted to kind of share with you guys a little bit is, Curtis Jones is a player that like Liverpool fans actively hated for like quite a bit of time because he was a young player trying to develop in that like 8 position, and he wasn't quite that guy, and he wasn't getting like enough playing time. Like he definitely was like, a minute here, start there, and he was very inconsistent, like most young players are. And it wasn't until Klopp gave him kind of like a couple of games where now he's starting to score goals and he's looking a lot more comfortable. But in order for young players to develop, you kind of have to be willing for them to make the mistakes on your time. And we're not really that good with that. We expect players to get a couple minutes there, and just to be like ready to go. And despite his price tag, Fabio Vieira is quite young and doesn't have that much experience. And so you have to open up a pathway for him to learn his trade, and to get used to playing with Arsenal. And so I think that's why Granit kind of has to go. But, that's not to say that Vieira doesn't need to step into that position and actually make it happen. I don't think he's done enough, but next season, let's see what he does, but he will be here. So, that's just where I'm at with it. Richard Walsh says, good luck with that to Bob Fabio, Arsenal Forever says this is the biggest bottle job in history of the Premier League. Saida says Arsenal fans like to use City as an example of players not necessarily fitting in right away, but when it comes to our own players, they're quick to dismiss them. Yeah, it's one of those where I think you have to give somebody like a couple of games in a row in order for you to actually see what the player is like. Basically, Fabio plays like 30 minutes. He plays, he starts a game here. He's never started back-to-back games for Arsenal Football Club, and so he really hasn't had enough time to build up steam. But I'm kind of like okay with people writing him off, because when he eventually starts playing well, like Kivior, who I know made a little bit of a mistake against Brighton, but there were people in the chat, the other day talking about Kivior like a dog and saying, like we should loan him out, we should sell him, he's crap, we can't use him, and he just had a couple of games and he relaxed and he started playing well. And so, I'm keeping my Vieira stocks, and I do think that you have to open up a pathway for him to learn and for him to get more minutes, so I'm kind of okay with it, to be honest. But I get that Xhaka is better than Vieira right now, but if you gave Vieira more playing time, I'm pretty sure that he could play the 8 position better than Xhaka. So yeah. Coach Dave says this fan base has an unhealthy emotional attachment to Xhaka, Arteta, and Saka. None of them are more important than the badge. I mean, I don't know. Maybe an unhealthy emotional attachment for you is maybe just having balance and a cool mind, when talking about Saka, Arteta, and Xhaka. I think a lot of people are still, the reason why they're not open to selling Xhaka is not necessarily because they think Xhaka is the best player in the world. It's because they want to just move the starters down a peg. Not necessarily they don't want him starting, but they just want to move him down a peg. The reason why Arsenal fans, I think, are not as willing to turn on Arteta as some of the Arteta outers are is because maybe they just feel like, you need to give somebody some time, and they view our season as more of a foundation than an ending point. And with Saka, I don't really understand like the desperation to kill him. Ever since he missed the penalty, he's been enemy number one. And I don't really understand why people tried to say that he had a bad game against Brighton. He was probably one of our better players. And so, yeah, I think what some people feel like is an unhealthy attachment to players is they're not willing to turn on them on a dime just because you're upset or you can't, channel your emotions a little bit. Because I think some people, I feel like it's an unhealthy, I think it's unhealthy to every single time a player has a bad game to just throw them in the trash. Or every single time, like, Arteta doesn't win a game, it's time for Arteta out to get the banners back out. But that's how I view it. I just think sometimes, like, even with Arteta, like, we'll talk about it, like, before the season starts, what our expectations are. But obviously, like, next season, like, people are definitely going to have bigger expectations of Mikel Arteta than they did this season. Most people at the beginning of the season said Champions League and a trophy. He didn't get the trophy. He went for the Premier League. People are now in hindsight saying we should have went for the Carabao Cup. Nobody was saying that before. He missed out on it. Next season, he has to come out with a trophy. Like there's a lot of stuff he has to do. So I think some people are just a little bit more balanced and, relaxed about things. And some people are just like desperate to kill people, because they're emotional, so it just is what it is. But those are my feelings. Like, because I also understand that, like, sometimes we're too, like, eager to, like, want to be positive about things too. But Saka being like the main culprit of the end of the season for me is a reach. It really is. Like, I don't know. And I can understand why people want to keep Xhaka. I'm not that interested in it. Arsenal Forever says the seagulls have stolen the fish. Whatever that means. Boy says everyone slandering Vieira right now is going to be his biggest fan by December. I'm just going to keep my stocks. That's all I'm going to say. So yeah, Tyrese says, what are your thoughts on ESR's future? You think he will leave? Only if like a good bid comes in. And I'm not quite sure that a good bid will come in because he hasn't played that many minutes. He's been out on the very outskirts of the team for so long. And so, I would hate to see us sell ESR for peanuts. He's an English, player that, on his good days, he's really good. And so I'm torn. I feel like on a good day, ESR is worth about like 40 million. And so if somebody comes in with a 20 million, 15 million type bid, I think we should turn our nose up at it, especially if you're selling Granit Xhaka. Give ESR an opportunity to, reestablish himself in the team, but he has to want it too. Some of the, reports around ESR are not necessarily about whether or not Arsenal feel like he's talented. They clearly know he's talented. It's his application and does he want it enough? And that's important. It's, I've seen a little bit of like, oh my gosh, why didn't they play ESR? Why isn't he getting the playing time? We have no idea what happens behind the scenes, but I have a hard time believing that, Arteta just doesn't rate ESR anymore and he's trying to ruin his career or anything. ESR just might be eating too many Nandos. Do you know what I mean? And so he has to want it. And the standards have risen. I don't think you can just be Emile Smith-Rowe anymore and play games. We brought in Trossard. That's limited some of his minutes. Martinelli and Saka have went into a new level that's limited his minutes. And there were a lot of people before like that were saying that Odegaard would kind of fade to the back and ESR would take over his position and Odegaard would be a squad player. How's that working out for you? We're building this team around Odegaard, Saka, and Martinelli. So that's a position that's going to be difficult to break into. And then we'll probably buy a left 8 that's going to be 90 million player on tons of wages. So ESR, if he wants to break into this team and play for Arsenal, he's going to have to really want it. I think he can do it, but we can't want it for him. Nashville says we should sell Tierney. I just think he will go, naturally. I just think it's time, but it just is what it is. He doesn't necessarily fit the style, so it's an odd fit. And most of the reports have said like he's basically going to Newcastle, which will kill some people. But as long as we get a decent fee for him and we recruit properly, I don't think it'll be that big of a deal. I know people are saying Vieira's played more games than Kivior, but like that doesn't really matter. You need consistent game time in order to... Some of the reasons why Martinelli and Saka are so good is because we had to play them and they had to just kind of grow up. There were games where Martinelli wasn't great, Saka wasn't great, but we still had to play them because they were the best that we had. It's a little bit different with Vieira because he's a young player trying to break into our team that, again, didn't have very many first team minutes. He came out of their academy, and when Luis Diaz left in January, he got into the first team at Porto. So that was only like a 6-month period. He got injured, and then he came to us injured, missed preseason, and then people just expect him with limited minutes, inconsistent minutes just to be like the best thing. Has he been amazing? No, but like to write him off so soon seems a little bit silly. So it's not really about has he played more than Kivior? Or does he have more minutes than Kivior or anything? It's like they're in different like places in their career anyway. So yeah, but enough about Vieira. I think it's one of those things where people just have to see it for themselves. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but I have a feeling that I'm right. So Yo-Yo says football development is rarely linear. Here's another example for you. The funny thing about the Willock Wars is that obviously they've come off of the back of him doing one really nice pass on the outside of his boot against Spurs when they absolutely ripped them apart. And we were also not playing well during that time. And so people had started this whole we shouldn't have sold Willock thing. But when Willock was playing for Arsenal, he had games where he was awful. He was, non-existent. He couldn't really play the style. He was a little bit raw, underdeveloped. Like he just wasn't really what we were looking for. Most people were happy to get 25 million for him and let him go. But now that he's playing day in and day out for Newcastle, he's developed into the player that he is now. And Newcastle fans, because I follow so many of them and I know some of them, is there were times where Willock was awful for them. He had that little stint of 8 games where he scored like 8 goals in a row and all that kind of stuff. And then he went through like a dark patch. And then at the second half of the season, he came back up. So young players don't really develop unless you're willing to allow them to be shit on your time. And we don't like that. We want players to just be good all the time. And that's why people were willing to part with Willock, but he found a place where he could develop on somebody else's time. And it worked out for him, and I'm happy for him. But Arsenal fans are so fickle, and they just feel like players should just come in and just be like perfect, when they don't remember that we have young players in our team right now that have had the odd game where they're like not really that great. You know what I mean? But I appreciate that some people want to go in hindsight and speak about Willock and all of that because they're disappointed about the way that our season ended and they're worried about Newcastle and, you know, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, I think in a couple of years when Willock's not even at Newcastle anymore because they decide to buy better players, this conversation will seem quite silly, you know. So what else do I have here for you guys? So yeah, this is, you know, basically the consensus online is like a lot of people are saying selling Xhaka would be a huge mistake. Don't care if he's 31 this year. He's never had a better season for us and will comfortably be able to play like into his 30s. Yeah, like I can't read that. You don't build a team kind of like getting rid of players and then bringing players in. Like you kind of like build basically making your starters into backups and, you know, bringing in better starters. I think the Xhaka situation is a little bit more complicated than that because Arsenal are not forcing him out. He wants to leave. And I think that's what people kind of need to wrap their heads around and get over is that, like, Arsenal are not doing anything sinister to Granit Xhaka. They've probably already told him that, no, you're not a guaranteed starter, which he should not be. And he's made a grown-up decision to continue his career somewhere else, but he's not being forced out or treated poorly or anything like that. And so if he doesn't want to be here, then it's not an Arsenal squad building issue because you also don't want to keep somebody against their will, right? This is more of just a natural evolution for Arsenal and Granit Xhaka for him to move on to a team, probably Bayer Leverkusen in Germany, in a league where he can play 4 or 5 more years at the top level. Xabi Alonso wants him to be his leader in midfield, and we can just, you know, go about our business. As long as we recruit properly, I think some of these conversations end up looking a little bit like, not silly, but like, oh, well, maybe I was tripping, you know? Amira's saying, for everyone thinking we sold Willock for Spineless Vieira, we used the money to get Odegaard, whose level's above Willock. Yeah, I think people are just like desperate to be mad about something. And yeah, I'm not going to be that. I can't be that. Boy says, you used the Willock money to get Odegaard. Yeah, like you said. Yo-Yo says, can't wait for Xhaka to leave. Been long overdue. I know you have. You've been wanting him to leave for a while. Ify says, Xhaka wants to leave. It makes sense for us to sell him. And there's a lot of sentimentality, I think, from an Arsenal perspective. And I think we've grown up in a Wenger world, and Wenger Arsenal was very sentimental, very attached to certain personalities and certain players, even when we shouldn't be. And I think it might have been Vieira that did an interview, and he said they asked him like what was one of the best things about Arsene was him trusting players, and what was one of the worst things was him trusting players. And I think that's the world that we're used to, is like we keep players sometimes too long and we cannot foresee like a world without them. And the world passes us by and evolves and gets better and improves around us while we're holding on to players because we want to be nice. And I've seen a lot of tweets lately about people feeling like they don't connect with this Arsenal or they don't like this Arsenal because it's too ruthless, and Hale End graduates aren't going to get any more, you know, minutes, and the way that Reece has been treated and the way that ESR is being treated and the way Willock was treated and all this kind of stuff. We've never been better than we've been. Like in the last really good team that we had was probably like in 2015. That team fell short as well, but that was probably like the most talented team that we've had. And then like before that was like in 2008, maybe 2009, around like the Eduardo times. You know, I can't help but see that we're on an upward trajectory the more ruthless we've been. You know, if this was Wenger's Arsenal, we'd still have Pepe in the team. We'd still have, you know, Xhaka be signing a new deal. You know, it's just, we need to get used to the idea that some people are not going to make it, you know, and as long as we recruit properly, it won't matter. We'll move forward. And like, some of the things that I've seen, it kind of started with Patino. People were like very weird about that. A kid that next season is not starting for us. He's not starting for us. He shouldn't be starting for us. But they're so afraid that like they get FOMO about like losing a academy kid, that they like, oh no, we're going to let him go. He don't want to be here. He doesn't want to be here. Patino wants to like go somewhere else and start, and we cannot offer that to him, and we should not offer it to him. So we just need to get a good fee. Reiss Nelson is not being treated poorly. He had an opportunity to sign a new deal with Arsenal, and he's declined it several times. He's not being treated poorly. He doesn't want to be here. So it's just a different world at Arsenal now. And I get that, like, Willock said he felt undervalued, but basically he just wasn't being given playing time, and he was told that he needs to find somewhere to be. He wasn't, being abused. Like, you know what I mean? It's just, ruthlessness is not, this sinister thing. I think Arsenal have been too sentimental and too nice for too long. Arsenal fans have gotten too comfortable with the idea that all we need is top four and to love our players and to be happy. But Arsenal need to kick on. They really do. And some people are just not going to make it. And again, if that includes Vieira, if he stinks it out next season with more playing time, I will say I got it wrong and he needs to go. My feelings around the player will not stop me from feeling like we need better, and I think that sometimes with Arsenal fans, it's like we get really attached to certain things sometimes. And like, I understand giving it time and like actually using context and being balanced and not rushing into things. But players like Reiss Nelson, he's been around for a long time. He's a good player. He's been offered a contract. He didn't want it. Like, we could just move on from here. Do you know what I mean? Like, he's been at the club for such a long time. I don't know, like, if that makes sense, because it's like you give somebody enough time and you think about all the parts of it. You're not like reactionary or anything, but like, we have to be ruthless, right? At some point we have to be ruthless. So yeah, but not stupid with it, if that makes sense. Nashville says KT has been one of my favorites for a long while. He also needs to go now. He's been a favorite of mine as well. When we first got him, I was like, thank God we finally got a good player. He was like one of the first players of like this new Arsenal that we had. Like, it's just a shame. Like, the injuries really, I think dampened kind of like, not the love around KT, but maybe the trust. And then once we brought in Zinchenko, he really just kind of fell down the pecking order. And Kieran Tierney and the right team is too good to be sitting on our bench. And so I do think Arsenal need to maybe look at the idea of bringing in another left back if KT does decide to go. But we could do better. We can do better. And we should feel like we can do better because we need somebody that can actually play the way that we want to play, Yo-Yo says Player FC won't end until the club is successful again. I agree. I think Player FC is very, very connected to a team that's not doing well. A club that has Player FC like I've never seen is Manchester United. Their fans have so many guys with the avatar of Martial and Rashford, and they are definitely like, no matter what's going on, they have an agenda going on, and we're kind of like that as well. We're desperate for an agenda or something, and I think it's more because we haven't been as successful, because like good clubs don't really have Player FC. They don't. They're more concerned about what's best for the club, not what's best for my agenda. But yeah, I think KT, like, he's gonna go. He should go. No hard feelings. Love him, but like, we can move on. So last but not least, I just want to kind of look at like what the team could look like if we were to bring in Caicedo and Rice. Like I said earlier, Arsenal are looking to bring in both players. I have my suspicions because, again, Rice isn't like a perfect fit for that left 8 position. We already have Jorginho. We also have Partey, so there's 2 DMs already there. I'm sure El Neni will move on. He should move on, by the way. But if you put Caicedo in that DM role, I guess maybe you'll play Declan Rice in the 8. One thing that I have seen is, like, if you guys haven't seen it, if you just type in, like, where Declan Rice wants to play or whatever, there are quotes of him saying that he does feel like he could do really well in that box-to-box role. And I think under the right manager, that could potentially be true, but it's not like a natural fit. Like, I don't see him like, you know, I don't know. Like, I feel like because we see him so much in a double pivot, it's difficult to imagine him in a more advanced role. Even though he does get forward for West Ham, he does, you know, progress the ball and has these really good progressive carries and all that kind of stuff. He still need to develop into that position, I feel like. But if you want a manager that's going to help you become like a world class box to box midfielder, you play for Mikel Arteta, you play for Pep Guardiola. You know what I mean? And so if he comes to us, I think Arteta could really help him get into that mode. If he can get Granit Xhaka to do it, I mean, the thing about it is, like, both Thomas Partey and Granit Xhaka were not perfect fits for either of the positions that they play today. You know, Thomas Partey was more of a box-to-box midfielder. He could also play in a double pivot, but he was more box-to-box. And Granit Xhaka is more of a deep-lying playmaker. And he turned that, like, probably more suited to be a double pivot type of, partnership into what he wants. And there's a ceiling on it. That's why we're looking to move players on and go forward. But Declan Rice is somebody that, as a young player, could probably develop as well, you know, so, or a younger player than Granit Xhaka, he could become better in that position. But Caicedo is perfect for that DM position, I think, in terms of winning the ball back, being able to receive the ball off of the center backs. Like you guys have mentioned several times, he plays in a more progressive system that's more similar to ours, so he wouldn't be a fish out of water, in a team that, has a lot of possession. He would also be nice to have because he can play right back. There's just a lot of things that you can do with Caicedo. I don't know if he can necessarily play more advanced. I don't feel like I'm getting the feeling that he can, or he'd be a great fit at it, but this is a good start. Basically everything else the same, but Partey's position and Xhaka's position are occupied by the two new midfielders. And to me, this is a good start because what you have with Declan Rice and Caicedo is the ability to win the ball back. You have legs, you have technical ability, but you don't lose physicality. You actually gain a lot of physicality. And I know Xhaka and Partey are not necessarily they're not the smallest, but they definitely don't win their physical duels. That it's a hard one to say. I think when we go up against the Liverpools, the Newcastles, the Evertons, teams that are just willing to kind of like, fight you, we're not necessarily like on point with that all the time. So, I think this is a decent start. Or like I said, a start, you guys. I know some people in the comments are probably like, that's not enough. I know it's not enough, you guys. I know it's not. It's just a good start. And it's really the positions that we should spend the most time on and spend the most money on, because let's be real, like that midfield has needed an upgrade for a while, Fabrizio says thoughts on the Xavi Simons rumors. I think they're quite loose at the moment. I mean, basically all he did was change his agent, and his agent is related to David Dein, and David Dein is obviously connected to Arsenal. So people are doing a little bit of math, to connect him to us. But in terms of like, if you want to buy a player that has like star quality, what I've been told is that this is the type of player that you want to buy. It's kind of the reason why I think we were in for Mudryk. You're in for Xavi Simons. It's a young player that is clearly going to be a superstar, and so even if you're not quite sure how you're going to use them at the moment, you buy them and you make it work. And I think that's kind of what he is. He's kind of like a number 10 that can play in the 8 position on the wings as well. Like, he's just kind of just a really good attacking player that scores lots of goals and gets a lot of assists. So I would take him, obviously. I just feel like maybe like Smith Rowe would need to leave in order to facilitate that. But he'd be a nice player to have for sure. Same thing. Michael Kwashi is saying like thoughts on Kudus as an attacking midfielder, wide forward. Same thing with him that I feel about Xavi Simons. I mean, not maybe as much of a star quality, but somebody that offers versatility because he can play right wing, because he's a left footer. He could play right wing for us and could also play that left 8. What I like about Kudus is his ball carrying ability and his strike of the ball. He's somebody that can definitely find top bins. He wants to shoot on sight. He's kind of selfish in a way where he's like, I want to score the goal, you know. And I think some of our players tend to be a little bit, the thing about like Xhaka, Odegaard, and Saka is they've all been taught by Arteta to be goal scorers, if that makes sense. So they're still learning and they're getting better, but you have some players that just naturally have that about them, you know, so when they get into the box, they want to take the shot on sight. He's one of those. And so I wouldn't mind him either. We have been linked to him. The links haven't really gone any further than Ornstein saying that we're interested in him, but obviously, like, I would take him. I think Ajax would want a fortune, but I would take him for sure. So yeah, Jordan Davis says we need to get Caicedo, Rice, Dahoud, and Gundogan. Well, the thing about Dahoud is he's already going to Brighton. So you can't get him. He'll most likely replace Alexis McAllister. And then you saying Gundogan, he's still open to stay at Manchester City. I wouldn't be surprised if they, you know, came out with, you know, a new contract for him, a new contract offer for him. But, I mean, obviously, like, I wouldn't turn down Gundogan. Look at how he's such an amazing player for City, and he has that experience. And, you know, I think that left 8 position, the way that we play it, is modeled quite similarly the way that City plays it, you know. So I wouldn't mind him. I just feel like we could find a different dynamic, maybe a player with more athleticism, maybe more of an athlete, and do it a little bit differently our way. My fear about doing everything the City way and just buying a bunch of City players and putting them into our team is that we're creating a less good version of what they do. And when we play against them, or we play against teams that are similar to them, we don't do as well, you know. And I think you need to figure out ways for our system to be able to beat the City system, if that makes sense, which is what Liverpool did. They play nice football, but they're more direct. They have athletes, hard workers in midfield. They can press. And so their style and City style kind of go against each other quite well. And I think we need to have a little bit of that. I don't want a B version of City, what they do, because we'll never be able to beat them with that. Ever. It won't happen. Kevy Kev says, hey, Jess, good to see you. Hope you're doing great. I'm doing okay. I'm alive. Brighton result took it out of me. I was just like, this is just too much for me. You know, they're just doing the most and they're just wasting my time, you know, but I'm feeling good. I'm happy about, you know, what the summer's looking like and moving forward. And when I take my mind away from like social media and like what everybody else is saying, I feel like we built a really good foundation. We just have to take control of it and actually add on to it and not just let this opportunity go past us. Yo-Yo says we don't really have good ball strikers. It's something that we're missing. I think ball striking, we're missing a dead ball specialist as well. We're missing maybe a penalty, you know, specialist as well. There's several things that can give you just like the slight edge on margins that we don't really have. Look at Trent Alexander-Arnold yesterday, something out of nothing, a free kick. He's a dead ball specialist. He gets a couple of those a season. Have we gotten a single goal off of a dead ball, like a free kick this season? I don't think we have. And so it's definitely something that we're missing. Somebody like that makes penalties every single time. I know Saka is our designated penalty taker, but maybe somebody else as well. And then players that could actually strike a ball. We're missing that for sure. Liam, thank you so much for your super chat, says, if you had to pick one of Rice or Caicedo, who, people are going to shoot me, but I'm going to go with Rice. I'm going to go with Rice because I think the two of them can do quite similar things, but Rice has the soft factors of the leadership and all that kind of stuff. And I think those soft factors matter for an Arsenal team that are going into Champions League, uncharted territory. And especially if you lose Xhaka, if you lose a leader, you need to replace him. And so that's why I think Rice is even more important, and probably why Arsenal want him the most, is because he has those leadership qualities. But both of them would do a job for sure. Like, I mean, I wouldn't be upset with either of them for sure, but it'd be really nice if Arsenal could get both. But I may be asking for too much. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, Max Watson says Rice has presence. He does have presence. I feel like right now Caicedo is a really good player and a good setup that could potentially become like one of the best, you know, whatever. Sometimes I do think maybe he is like Conte again. And maybe if we don't get him, we'll look back on it and be like, why didn't we go after him? We should have did it. It was obvious. But I can't get it out of my mind that we need somebody with the personality of Rice. I know he maybe comes off a little bit corny and maybe people think he's too overhyped because he's English, but when you watch that guy play, you don't miss him. You definitely look at him and you say that's their best player. And I like that. Ty Jr. says if we're a serious team, we should go after Kane. Kane wouldn't come to us. He wouldn't come to us. If he was in any other team, I think you could probably say that. But he's a Spurs legend. He's not going to disrespect Spurs like that and come to Arsenal. I know that Sol Campbell did what he did, but that's so different, I think. And so I think the idea that Kane would come to Arsenal is nonsense. It would never happen. Kafunso says, I want technical, pacey, and strong. We need Osimhen. I think with Reiss Nelson leaving, I feel like that makes getting a right wing maybe more of a priority than a striker, even though I think a striker is really important. Going into the Champions League with just Jesus and Nketiah makes me worried. Yeah. So it's a little bit like, okay, you don't want to be going into a Champions League knockout with Nketiah starting, do you? So striker is a position where I look at it and I'm like, I feel like that should be a priority. But if Reiss Nelson doesn't stay, you need to bring in another winger because we don't have one on the right-hand side. So yeah. And we need quite a bit. Like we still need, a fullback, a center back, so we might just miss out on that striker, which would suck. It really would, but I don't think you do everything. Ivy says, Reiss was unlucky against Brighton. I wish him all the best. I do too. Cincinnati says Jesus must repent in preseason. The thing about Jesus is he's just who he is. Like he's exactly what was on the box, With him and Zinchenko, I feel like we got exactly what was described in the description on the box. Like, technical players lifted us up a level, but have flaws. They're not perfect. And the flaws were known. And so we know Gabriel Jesus is probably never going to be a 25-goal-a-season striker. But we share the goals around, so it doesn't really hurt us that much. It's just we don't have a plan B because him and Nketiah are kind of similar. So yeah, I'm not too disappointed in Gabriel Jesus' season, to be fair, because I do think he scored quite a bit of goals this season and got quite a bit of assists, even considering he was out for 4 months. Coming back, he scored 4 goals in 5 or something like that. But he's always going to miss those big chances. And so, yeah, he was just not really anything different than what we thought he would be, to be fair. Let's see. Kevy Kev says, any concrete links to a new center forward, Rasmus Højlund could be that guy. Nothing concrete. Yo-Yo says, Arsenal will potentially have to sell a lot in order to facilitate all these potential signings. I do think that we have the players, though, to do it. I mean, Balogun, who has chosen the U.S., if you guys haven't seen, that's official. FIFA confirmed. But I think he's gone. Tierney's gone. Xhaka's gone. We already sold Pablo Marie. He's already gone. So just even that in itself, if you get at least 30 for Balogun, you get at least 30 for Tierney, and you get 15 for Xhaka. Oh my gosh, I'm doing math on stream. 75 right there, right? So yeah, so that's already 75 million, if you could do that. And those are sales that you could actually see happening. It's just some of those guys like Cedric, they're not getting anything for him, are we? Yeah, so Holding is also up for sale, which is a good news to me. No offense to Robert, but it's time. So we'll see. But Arsenal also just need to be willing to spend the money as well, for sure. So yeah, Richard Walsh says, good luck to Man City tomorrow. Proper club, proper manager, proper players, 5 EPL titles and 6 years. Don't lie. Yeah, they're probably the best team in the world right now. Tyrell Gunner TV says, Holding needs to go. He's a yes man. Bendover says, Edu is at the barbecue. We are getting shillings. Cincinnati says, the league one eye test isn't, though people. I think people are crazy to think we're going to get like 50, 60 for Florin Balogun. I don't see that being realistic. I think 30 million would be more than enough, to be honest. Nashville says, bring in a striker and Jesus is an extra winger on the right. So here's my thoughts on that. Is that makes sense in practical terms, but in reality, Jesus left Man City to get away from that exact scenario. He was playing on the wing and he wanted to play number 9, and he came to Arsenal because he would be able to play number 9. So I feel like Arteta will be loyal to him, at least in the short term, which, you may not like, and he'll play number 9, and not be shunted out to the wing. So, yeah. That's another reason why I kind of think the striker won't come in just yet. So yeah. But yeah, we do kind of like need a striker, but at the same time, like, we do score a lot of goals. Like, I don't think goals were kind of our issue. I think we need to figure out why we can't defend all of a sudden. That's a big one. I'm like, we all of a sudden can't defend. Need to figure that out. Need depth in defense. Midfield needs to be upgraded, and then see what else we can do. I'm a little bit leery about bringing in somebody like Moussa Diaby. I still feel like I'm not 100% like into that, but the club tend to know better than me, so we'll see for sure. Let's see. Keenan says, make sure you slap a buyback on Balogun, a buyback, a sell on, all that kind of stuff for sure. Ty Jr. says, show no love. Love will get you killed. Aha says, Jess, thoughts on Tomiyasu injury till September. I'm not surprised. Like, he needed like knee surgery. It's a big injury, so he'll be out for a significant amount of time, which is kind of why I feel like we need a fullback to come in. We needed a center back no matter what, but a fullback definitely needs to come in. Tomiyasu is somebody that I think goes right down the pecking order next season. I think he's such a good player, but at the same time, his availability, he's only really been available for Arsenal for like 4 months. And they also said that he's going to be away at the Asia Cup in January and February. So as soon as he comes back, he's going to leave us. And so I just find his lack of ability to be quite frustrating, because he's such a like utility player in all positions back there, that I think actually his injury has hindered us so much. Not maybe more than Saliba, but more than people have, maybe noticed. And so I just think we need to bring in players that make his role a lot less important, and, then we won't miss him as much. But I love Tomiyasu. I just am like, damn. So you're going to come back in September, need a couple months to get up to speed, because he takes a long time to get up to speed. And then the moment you get up to speed, you're going to leave us for this Asia Cup. That's kind of shit, isn't it? So just bring in new players, and then we won't need to worry about it as much. Let's see. Hot Hit says, for me, Balogun has a higher ceiling than Nketiah. Even if you wanted to do that, like, I know people are like, well, why don't we just sell Nketiah? Once we gave him those wages, we basically decided that he would be our backup striker. He's on 90 grand a week or something like that. And no team of his caliber, like a Leeds, a Crystal Palace, like from mid Premier League level to below that, are going to pay Eddie Nketiah those types of wages. And so when he signed that contract, we basically were tethered to him for a little bit of time. So it's actually easier to sell Balogun than it is to sell Nketiah, and that is actually for me a bigger factor than who's actually better, or has a higher ceiling. So it's just something that it is what it is. And all three, Jesus and Kedia, Balogun, they're all so similar. We need something different. And if Balogun needs to be sacrificed for us to get that, then that's what happens. You know, I don't think Eddie's getting that much playing time next season, to be honest. I don't. I really don't. I mean, the way, even like Trossard, he plays that center position better than him. So yeah, Saida says, come next season, if Jesus gets similar numbers to this season, I feel the best thing we can do is bring in a number 9 in the 24-25 season. I know it sounds harsh, but we can't be sentimental. That's when I actually think it'll happen, Saida. I don't think it'll happen this summer, but I think it'll happen next summer. I think we could do another season of this. And actually, if we bring in another forward and, you know, if we do some things, I think we could score more goals, and, you know, the wingers will be just a little bit more clinical. We'll create more chances, you know, stuff like that. But yeah, I don't think it'll happen this summer. I don't think he's going to have one season of playing in the 9 position, and then the next time he's going to be a winger. Like, I just don't see it. So yeah, Mashego says Eddie will force a move. You're hoping that he does, but, you know, it depends on if he feels like he can get similar wages somewhere else. I don't think he's going to force a move this summer. I'd be surprised, to be honest. Someone like Sesko, Hoyland, Ferguson next summer. That's why I think maybe next summer. It's also with like Hoyland, like the thing about it's like, I read like a long thing about him. He's a prospect. He's not somebody like, he looks really good on comps, but that's like in Serie A, not like starting every single game. And so I think that maybe like another season for him in that league, maybe we can look at him a little bit longer. Like you guys said, Sesko, he might, you know, stay where he's at, and you can look at them a little bit longer. I don't think as much of a priority as I think that it is. I think it's something that gets missed because we have bigger priorities, you know, and then next summer, maybe there's better options. All the good guys, the Osimhens, the Martinez's, like those guys are going to go to clubs where they're guaranteed starter. Like that's where they're going to go, you know. So Man United needs a striker, Chelsea needs a striker. That's where those guys are going to go. So yeah, we'll probably be looking at it like a younger option, but even still, I see some of the younger options that we're looking at or people are talking about, and I'm like, these are like real prospects, you know. I'm not sure that they're really ready, you know, to move to us anyway. So yeah. Steve Durbin says 25 goals conceded at home and only 3 clean sheets. That's why we haven't won the title. Tyrell Gunner says sell Tommy and Holding in the summer. It's clear. Can't sell Tommy when he's injured, you know, so Tommy will probably be here, and I'm not sure that we need to be selling him. You know, I just think let him heal up, but make sure you have players. Like if you buy another fullback and a center back, him not being there is not that big of a deal. And then the second half of the season, he'll be back, hopefully uninjured, and then we just have another boost back there. But yeah, I think we need better players than Tomiyasu anyway. You know, I think just in general, we should be looking at a top fullback signing to replace Kieran Tierney. That's different than Zinchenko. And then another center back that's on similar level as Gabriel and Saliba, you know. And then you're looking at the, you know, Tomiyasu situation, and he's just a bonus when he comes back. So yeah, Amira says, question, after 2 seasons, Partey rated his Arsenal career 4 out of 10. 1 season later, what would you rate it now? All things considered, I'd only give it a 5. 6 at a push. He always falls off towards the end. I would say maybe like a 6. You know, I think him either being just really bad in certain games and also his injury record just has combined with a very underwhelming signing. And I think what we got wrong more than anything is not buying him, but buying him as like a main midfielder. I think we made a mistake with that because he was not the main guy at Atleti, and he shouldn't have been the main midfielder at Arsenal either. There was a reason why they rotated him. He didn't start so many games. There was a reason why he kind of played the big games when they really needed him. He is a part of a group, but he cannot be the support. He can't be a load-bearing wall, like, you know, because he's just too fragile, and mentally I just don't think he has the ability to be, your most important player. And he became that for us. And maybe just retroactively because we didn't have anybody else. But I think that's more what it has been than anything else. But his signing has been quite disappointing, even though I think the player is of high quality. But it just hasn't really worked out the way that I would have hoped, So yeah, like probably a 6, he just can't be our most important guy. So yeah. EK is saying Mohamed Simikan for right back, center back signing. That's who I would get. I know I also like Gehi, but Gehi doesn't cover 2 positions. And so, because there's so much that we need to do, Simikan is mostly right back, but also plays center back. Physical monster, could do all the, sweeping up. But what he has that, like, I think Saliba sometimes lacks is that, like, real physical aggression. I find him to be like more similar to like a Konate type defender, more of than like Saliba, who's more like poetry in motion type guy, so, and we need some aggression in our back line. I do think that even though we were a good defensive team first half of the season, I think we got soft. And so you need some guys that are just hard-nosed, like very aggressive defenders, not stupidly aggressive, but, like to get stuck in, like to, we just don't have guys that are like defender first a lot of the times, you know what I mean? And that might sound like harsh on Saliba and Gabriel, but I do think you need something a little bit different. Also on Ben White too, because he's more of a on the ball type of guy too. And so we need a little bit more grit back there. And so pace, athleticism, aggression, good one-on-one defending, height, speed, those are the types of things that we need. And he offers that in more than one position. So yeah, that's who I would bring in for sure. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here because I need to eat some dinner. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the stream and you kind of enjoyed like the new setup. Hopefully it wasn't too bad not being able to see your comments, but I liked it. It was nice and clean. So, yeah, but make sure you guys like this video, subscribe to the channel before you go. And I will definitely see you guys in the next one. Everybody who super chatted and commented in general, thank you so much for being here. At one point there was like 300 of you guys in here, which is like amazing. So yeah, love you guys very much and I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye y'all.